Hello and welcome to Kentucky Wide, a podcast production of the Fraser Kentucky History Museum. I'm Mick Sullivan.
And I'm Sarah Jemerson. Heading out to explore Kentucky anytime soon? Or just curious about the dusty corners of the Commonwealth? Looking for a story with royalty, ghosts, historical figures, and delicious food? Look no further, because today we're talking about Bardstown's Old Talbott Tavern.
This episode was written by Jason Berkowitz, whose passion and curiosity for the stories of Kentucky burns hotter than the fireplace at the old historic building in Nelson County. We're sure that you will feel it too.
Thanks for listening.
Let's jump in!
The term crossroads certainly conjures up a lot. Maybe you think of travel or destination. Perhaps you imagine an old stagecoach, weathered and beaten. Or if you're a folklorist, you might see the crossroads as a uniquely powerful place, the intersection between known and unknown, supernatural and mundane, even life and death itself. The Yoruba of West Africa believe their trickster deity, Eshu, resides at the crossroads. The ancient Greeks frequently placed shrines dedicated to the gods Hecate and Hermes at the crossroads as well. And what of blues legend Robert Johnson, who it said sold his soul at the crossroads to the devil himself, all to play the guitar? I suspect some of you may be thinking, what do African tricksters and Greek gods have to do with Kentucky? Directly? Very little. But the crossroads? Now that's a different story. For instance, in Appalachia, there are some who believe the only way to kill a witch is to hammer a stake with a few strands of witch's hair into the cold earth. Always at midnight, always at the crossroads. Death, trickery, the volatility of the soul market, that is all rather dark to be sure. However, not all crossroads are so sinister in nature. Some manage to avoid witches, devils, and trickster gods altogether, while still being sites of considerable importance, even power. The Old Talbott Tavern in Bardstown, Kentucky is one such place. Built at the crossroads of our nation, the post roads outside its front door leading north and south, east and west. The land on which the tavern has long resided was originally purchased in 1779 by a man named Hines, who immediately set to building an inn for weary travelers. Known as the Hines Hotel, it was completed that same year, just 1 year shy of the settlement of Salem, later renamed Bardstown. This makes the tavern the oldest western stagecoach stop in the United States, and, quite fitting for Kentucky, the oldest bourbon bar in the world as well.
The building has gone by many names over the years. The Hines, the Bardstown Hotel, Chapman's House, the Shady Bower Hotel, the Newman House, the Old Stone Tavern, and, of course, the Talbott Tavern. This last name stuck after a fellow named George Talbott and his wife, Annie, purchased the building in 1886. Built in the Old English style, the inn has thick stone walls, ceiling timbers, and 2 large fireplaces. There are 2 guest rooms on the second floor, men's and women's, as individual rooms were not widespread in the U.S. until the 19th century. What's more, the Old Talbott Tavern is likely the oldest surviving building in Kentucky, and one that has never closed, not once during its long, storied history, according to historians. And historians have a lot to track in the old building, with presidents and generals, kings and queens, all seeking shelter and fellowship in this unassuming inn found in the heart of Kentucky. Travelers leaving the eastern wilderness undoubtedly welcomed the rare creature comforts of a warm bed and a hot meal. Those heading north or south might even find themselves breaking bread with the likes of Washington Irving, perhaps even inspiring a line or two for one of his characters, like Ichabod Crane or Brom Bones. There were those who shared news with Henry Clay during his visits, while others played cards with John Fitch, the inventor of the steamboat. Presidents Andrew Jackson and Henry Harrison were both known to enjoy the inn and its amenities. The former was particularly fond of the central room's hearth fire. Harrison, unlike Jackson, was a bit more social, enjoying the inn's friendly atmosphere and the company of others.
More than just beds and breads, the tavern was used as a supply base during the Revolutionary War. General George Rogers Clark himself stored precious munitions and supplies in the tavern's cellar. Several wars later, yet another general, General George S. Patton, would become a common fixture, frequently dining at the old Talbott while stationed at Fort Knox. And what kind of Kentucky history would this be, if nary a word of Daniel Boone? Yes, the American frontiersman and pioneer testified at the tavern during its brief run as a courthouse. That's just blowing the dust off of the first few pages of the history books. French-American artist and naturalist John James Audubon lived there for years, paying rent with his famous artwork. In 1926, Queen Marie of Romania enjoyed tea at the Old Talbott Tavern while touring the United States. The father of American music himself, Stephen Foster, stopped by the tavern en route to visiting his cousin, John Rowan. Some historians believe he may have even penned My Old Kentucky Home during his brief stay there. Speaking of Kentucky, we have to mention Kentucky's most famous rail splitter, flatboat operator, and Hall of Fame wrestler. I, of course, am speaking of Abraham Lincoln. He, along with his parents Thomas and Nancy, lodged at the tavern while engaged in a land dispute. The court did not rule in their favor, and so 7-year-old Abe was whisked away to Indiana, his parents understandably frustrated by the court's refusal to recognize their claim.
People who lived under the historic roof go beyond the great emancipator. NAACP co-founder and key figure in the civil rights movement, Alexander Walters, spent some time in the Talbott Tavern in 1858 as well. But it was brief, and he was a newborn. You see, his mother Harriet was the tavern's enslaved cook, and she had no choice but to give birth to Alexander on the kitchen floor. In fact, people who were present that day claim she returned to work following the delivery. It was definitely not the tavern's proudest moment, but a historic and notable moment despite, because Walters would go on to partner with author and civil rights activist W.E.B. Du Bois, organizing the NAACP's inaugural conference, and later he became the organization's vice president in 1911. As for his mother, Harriet Walters, the tavern's eating room was eventually renamed in her honor as the Walters Dining Room. The Talbott was also host to French royalty. Arriving in Bardstown in 1797, exiled from France, was King Louis Philippe, his nation's penultimate monarch. His intentions were to wait out the French Revolution, whiling away the time by exploring the American frontier. When not doing his best Daniel Boone impression, the exiled king spent time in town, attending parties and watching marionette performances. Doing so, he would delightfully exclaim, "How little these local people know of the world." Sure, it was a bit condescending. But wanting to make himself at home, Louis Philippe had murals painted on the second floor during his stay at the tavern. Years later, after returning to the French throne, he would think back on the kindness and generosity of Bardstown and its citizens. And so, in the 1830s, King Louis Philippe sent vestments and 8 beautiful paintings to St. Joseph's Cathedral, constructed just a few years earlier.
As you can see, the Talbott Tavern has hosted a veritable who's who of historical movers and shakers, and even lawbreakers. The name of one heist scoundrel and notable outlaw, Jesse James, should certainly ring a bell. The way some Kentuckians tell a story, you'd be forgiven for thinking that he and the rest of the James gang robbed every bank in the Commonwealth. And while that might not be true, he certainly left his mark on our state, even in Bardstown, and especially the Talbott Tavern. As the story goes, James had spent the night drowning himself in liquor and others in boasts. Further and further into his cups he sank until a barkeep intervened, carrying the once and always bank robber to bed. Head spinning and mind racing, James turned his attention to the murals on the wall, or more specifically, the painted birds, which now appeared to be flying around the room. So, in a fit of confused rage, the outlaw drew his pistol, firing several shots at the foul intruders. I'm sure you'll be pleased to know that no birds were harmed during this drunken episode. However, the same cannot be said for the mural. The bullet holes are still there, featured prominently in what is now known as the mural room. As if the alcohol-fueled antics of the living were not enough, the Talbott Tavern has allegedly experienced its fair share of supernatural shenanigans as well. Faint whispering, slamming doors, mysterious orbs, freezing temperatures, electronics going haywire, all quite common at the tavern, according to both employees and guests. Indeed, most of this phenomena has been attributed to several spirits in particular. The apparition of a legless Union soldier has reportedly been seen dragging himself down the second-floor hallway. 8-year-old twins, having succumbed to dysentery, are said to cause their fair share of, dare I say, double trouble, swinging chandeliers or rocking chairs, always in pairs.
And of course, what would an old-timey place with old-timey rooms and old-timey furniture be without a creepy, old-timey doll? Yes, the Talbott Tavern claims one of those, too, haunted by the spirit of a young girl who had tragically fallen down the inn's staircase. The doll currently sits on a shelf in the general's quarters, except when it doesn't. Understandably, guests are asked not to touch it under any circumstances. Even the tavern's namesake and once owner George Talbott's wife, Anne, is said to haunt the establishment. Also known as the Lady in White, she is often seen looking out the second-floor window, thin, with wavy brown hair, wearing a long white dress. And last, but never least, say hello again to our old friend and outlaw, Jesse James. Once bane to the fanciful feathered wallpaper decorations, is now supposedly part of the inn's stable of spirits. Old Jesse has appeared on several occasions, lying next to guests in their bed. Again, always the scoundrel. The Talbott Tavern has a little bit of everything in its rich collection of years. History and hauntings, ornithologists and outlaws, kings and queens, and everything in between. Today, the old Talbott Tavern is as popular as ever. Visitors travel from all parts to stay overnight in one of the inn's 6 guest rooms. By all accounts, the food is excellent, serving award-winning takes on Kentucky specialties like burgoo and the hot brown. And on cooler nights, you can still find warmth by the same fireplace enjoyed by the likes of Boone, Jackson, Foster, and Fitch. It is a place steeped in heritage and history, legends, and lore. And those crossroads outside the old Talbott, perhaps they still possess a bit of that magic.
Thanks for listening to Kentucky Wide. Be sure to subscribe and share if you enjoy it. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another dive into Kentucky and our connections to the era of America's founding. Until then, stay curious, Commonwealthers.
Kentucky Wide comes to you from the Fraser Kentucky History Museum. We'll be opening our newest exhibit, I Too Am a Kentuckian, on July 4th, 2026. And we've also got a full calendar of programs, educational events, out-of-school time camps for kids, and more. So stay in contact. And as always, we hope to see you here at our museum in beautiful downtown Louisville, Kentucky.